Today I'm going to be talking about the intact monoclonal antibody glycoform characterization with the intact protein workflow on MassHunter BioConfirm software. So the instrument that we utilize to collect the data I'm going to show you later on in the presentation was utilizing our 6545XT, which has a lot of unique features for large biomolecule analysis. So down here we have the shell of the instrument, and we have our flight tube. The flight tube has an ultra-low vacuum of 10 to the minus 8 torr. This helps with excellent spectral clarity of your proteins. This system also has a one-click optimization for your large molecule analysis utilizing the Swarm AutoTune and a MassHunter acquisition. This system is capable of analyzing very large molecules up to 30,000 m/z. Upon installation of this Q-TOF, a protein performance verification will be conducted. This system also contains event-free capillary removal. So part of the system that you can't see is a handle here that will control a gate valve that isolates the vacuum behind the capillary. This enables you to remove the capillary, either clean it or replace it, without having to vent the instrument and wait for the system to pump back down to your final vacuum. This way you can be back up and running to collect your data within minutes. For the intact protein characterization, we use the Agilent 1290 Infinity 2 LC stack, as shown here. There are a variety of AdvanceBio LC columns shown here that can be used for intact protein characterization. The data I'm going to show in this presentation was using the PLRPS 1000 angstrom column. The PLRPS column consists of polystyrene divinylbenzene beads. They come in a variety of pore sizes from 100 to 4,000 angstroms, and particle sizes ranging from 3 to 10 and even higher. Some of the features of this column consist of a wide pH range from 1 to 14, the capability of handling extreme buffer concentration, less than 8 molar, high temperature stability, and this column can be used for both gradient or isocratic elutions. Some of the applications that utilize this column are high pH separations, oligonucleotides, the analysis of very large molecules. It's also a good alternative selectivity to C18. So the particles in the PLRPS column are inherently hydrophobic, so there are no bonded phases. They get typically an alkyl ligand that's required for reverse phase separation. This gives a highly reproducible material, as can be seen in these optical microscopy images. These particles are also free from solenols and heavy metal ions. For the intact NISMAB analysis workflow, we have our liquid chromatography parameters shown here on the left in this table. And the liquid chromatography system we utilized for the study was the Agilent 1290 Infinity 2 UHPLC system. We use the PLRPS column, 2.1 by 50 millimeter, 1000 angstrom, 5 micron. For solvent A and B, we have water with 0.1% formic acid and acetonitrile with 0.1% formic acid, respectively. Our gradient went from 5% B up to 70% B and back down to 5% B. The column was maintained at 60 degrees C. A flow rate of 0.5 mL per minute was utilized. We looked at a series of concentrations injected on column, but the data I'm going to show you today was from 100 nanogram injection on column. The MS acquisition parameters are shown here on the right, and we used our Agilent 6545 XT AdvanceBio Q-TOF system. The source we utilized was the dual AGS source, with a gas temperature of 350 degrees C and a sheath gas temperature of 400 degrees C. Our VCAP was maintained at 5500 volts with a nozzle voltage of 2000 volts. We collected data over a mass range of 300 to 7000 m/z, utilizing a reference mass of 922. Acquisition mode was positive high 10,000 m/z mass range. For the data analysis, we use BioPharma software, which has 3 main predominant workflows: an intact protein workflow, peptide mapping workflow, in a glycan analysis workflow. For the intact protein characterization workflow, MassHunter BioConfirm is utilized for the data analysis where the software integrates peaks and extracts spectra. It will then deconvolute the charge envelope, and if a sequence was provided, automatically match sequence and identify isoforms, and can generate a report if necessary. Some of the new features of BioConfirm 10 include the following. For the intact protein workflow, we can now get histograms or relative quantitation of your post-translational modifications, as shown here, and I'll discuss these in more detail. Protein digest workflow consists of relative quantitation of your post-translational modifications in a table or histogram format, multiple file comparison. When you release glycan workflow, it allows you to now do relative quantitation of your glycans in a table histogram format, and allows you to compare multiple files. There's also new layout buttons to improve the usability of switching between these three workflows. These new layout buttons allow you to change easily between the workflows, so you can change easily from the intact protein workflow to the digest workflow or the glycan workflow just by clicking on these buttons. You can customize the layout for any of the three workflows, save the layout, and you can also assign it to one of these buttons. Also, in the intact protein workflow, we can also use this unspecified disulfide linkages. What is this? This feature allows the software to calculate the correct intact mass of your biomolecule without requiring you to manually input all the disulfide linkages. So, if you look here, the intact mismatch has a possible 16 total disulfide linkages. And instead of having to type in these 15 linkages manually, this tells you, has you input how many of the 16 possible disulfide linkages are linked. You can type in the number, and it'll automatically calculate the correct intact mass for you without having to manually type in all 16 disulfide linkages. When you go into BioConfirm and the workflow sequences for the intact protein workflow, with the disulfide links here, you would just click Unspecified. The intact protein layout in BioConfirm is shown here. At the top, we have our sample table. This just tells you what samples are currently open in BioConfirm. Your sample chromatogram, your extracted biomolecule chromatogram, your mass spectrum, both as a centroid and profile view, your deconvoluted spectrum, your relative quantitation histogram, your biomolecule table, which has all your biomolecules stored in your data. There's this column here that's used for %quant, and you can select the biomolecule to use your relative quantitation by selecting the checkbox, or if you do not want to include this relative quantitation, you can deselect the checkbox, and the histogram will update accordingly to your selections. And in BioConfirm, this is just a zoomed-in view of the relative quantitation histogram. So if you want to use a feature for relative quantitation, you select it. If you don't want to use it, you deselect it, and the histogram will update accordingly. They group these entities by biomolecule ID or by sample, and I'll show an example of this later on in the presentation. Also, in BioConfirm, mirror plots of deconvoluted spectra. This allows for fast comparison of two samples. So here would be sample 1, sample 2. This dotted line here is a differential plot. This allows you to see if your biosimilars are the same or if they're different from each other. Now on to the data. Here we have our intact mismatch. We can see our 400 nanogram rejection on the column. You see our charge state distribution here, ranging from about 2,000 to 5,000 m/z. If we zoom in on a few of these charge states here, you can see our glycosylation pattern on each of these charge states, represented by each of these peaks within each of the charge state distributions. If now we perform maximum entropy deconvolution of this data, we see our various compositions of GOF, G1F, and G2F glycoforms. For randomness and triplicate, and we got our mass accuracy for these glycoforms shown here. Then you can see our average for the triplicate injections is under 6 ppm, but a relatively soft standard deviation. So not only do we get good mass accuracy, but good reproducibility on the platform. For relative quantitation, we have our average for the glycoforms as well as our standard deviation shown here. We can do this relative quantitation and group it as a histogram as biomolecule IDs. So when we group these by biomolecule ID, each of these colors represents one of the replicates. So we have replicate 1 in black, 2 in red, and 3 in green. Each of these groupings represents a different combination of the glycoforms that are found on this map. And we can see the relative quantitation of triplicate injections is highly reproducible from run to run to run. We can also group the relative quantitation histograms by sample. So now, each replicate is a different grouping. So replicate 1, replicate 2, replicate 3. And each color represents a different glycoform composition on this map. We also looked at percepted, and this is resulting charge shape distribution from 1 microgram injection, ranging from about 2,000 to 4,400 m/z. We zoom in on this charge shape distribution here. We can see our glycoforms on percepted for these charge shapes. When we form maximum entropy deconvolution, we see our various combinations of GOF, G1F, and G2F glycoforms. We also can get relative quantitation information regarding these glycoforms on percepted, as shown here on the histogram plot. We also wanted to look at the light and heavy chains of MISMAB. So we reduced the MISMAB into light and heavy chain components, used the same Agilent 1290 Infinity 2 UHPLC system, and used the same PLRPS column, a 2.1 by 50 millimeter column, 1,000 angstrom, 5 micron column. Using a typical reverse phase separation solvents, so we use water with 0.1% formic acid, and a cyanide with 0.1% formic acid. So we went out from 0% B up to 70% B, and back down to 0% B. We maintained a column of 60 degrees C with a flow rate of 0.35 mils per minute with a 200 nanogram injection on column. And the MS acquisition parameters here for the Agilent 6545 XT AdvanceBio Q-TOF are shown here on the table on the right. And here we use a dual AGS source. Here the gas temperature is sheet gas temp at 350 degrees C, 400 degrees C. And the cap and nozzle voltage at 5,500 volts and 2,000 volts. Our mass range was 500 to 3,200 ml/z. A reference mass IM-922 was utilized, and our acquisition mode was positive, standard 3,200 ml/z mass range. And for the analysis of the reduced MISMAB and its two light and heavy chain components, we utilized the intact protein layout on MassHunter BioConfirm 10. So we have our TIC here for the light chain. That's in this red box. This is this first peak in the TIC. For the mass spectrum, we see charge shape distributions ranging from about 1,000 to 3,200 ml/z. If we zoom in on this charge state here, it's the +10 charge state of the light chain. And here we have a mass resolution of about 48,000. So before maximum entropy deconvolution, we see that it still contains 2 interchain disulfide bonds. And what's nice about this Q-TOF is that we're able to obtain some isotopic stability and a deconvolution profile based on the mass resolution we're able to obtain with this platform. We also looked at the heavy chain within this map, the second peak in the TIC shown here. Here's the charge shape distribution that we observed, ranging from about 900 to about 3,000 ml/z, And if we zoom in on some of these charge states here, you can use the glycoforms retained on the NIST maps to these different charge states. From this 4-methyl centrifuge deconvolution, we see that the heavy chain contains 3 interchain disulfide bonds, and we're able to identify the 3 glycoforms on the heavy chain, the GOF, G1F, and G2F. We can get relative quantitation of these 3 glycoforms on the heavy chain of the NIST map as shown here, for the GOF, G1F, and G2F. And with that, I'd like to thank you for listening to this presentation.